thank you for coming. And it's an important subject we're going to looking at today, and it's a subject that has only really a fairly recent phenomenon, and that is insomnia. And at our retreat, we have a WhatsApp between all the staff, and I'm on the WhatsApp, and sometimes they say, "Hey Barbara, what do we do to this? What do you think of this?" And I saw communications, how they were concerned that many people aren't sleeping. So I wrote in and I said, well, I have discovered that they don't usually sleep. And often when people come to the health retreat, they think everything's going to be better. And so they get a little upset that they're not sleeping. So I used to always say to the guests, do you usually sleep? No. Insomnia is big today, and there's a reason. And we've been looking at this three-letter word all week. Why? And Newton's third law of motion says to every action there's an equal and an opposite reaction. There's always a reason. And Rudyard Kipling, he wrote a whole poem on it. I'll give you the first stanza. He said, I have 6 trusty serving men. They taught me all I know. Their names are what, why, when, where, how, and who. Do you take them with you? Everywhere you go. Because there's always a reason. And Proverbs 26 verse 2, the Bible says, the curse causeless shall not come. There's always a reason. And so whenever someone can't sleep, my first question is, when did this begin? What time do you go to bed? What do you usually do? And so I start to investigate. And there obviously are always some factors that come together. But as we've seen this week, it's usually not just one thing. Yes, I have a black eye, and we're thankful for a bit of makeup so you don't have to look at my purple eyeshadow this morning. Looks worse than it feels. That's really easy. Had a crash. But it's not usually that easy. There's usually a little bit of this, and a little bit of that, and a little bit of that. Oh, and this happened. That's why it's not always easy to put your finger on why. But as you begin to investigate and you start to see some factors, it's usually you can start to see why. Let me give you an illustration. We've got a strong rope. And a strong man comes and he cannot break that rope. But a little tiny mouse can start nibbling at the threads. That little tiny mouse that strong man could just stomp on and kill in an instant, that little tiny mouse can start nibbling at those threads and the rope can break. And that's often what happens when we have a health problem. It's often a whole lot of little bits and pieces. And so to heal them, what do you have to do? You have to rejoin all the little bits and pieces. And something that most of us haven't got, or we don't think we have, is time. And Ecclesiastes chapter 3, it says, there is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven. A time to be born, a time to die. A time to plant, a time to pluck up that which is planted. A time to break down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. There is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven. So let's have a look at sleep. And I'm going to go inside the brain and I'm going to show you some of the processes that are happening while we sleep. Right at the base of the brain, at the back, there's a little gland called the pineal gland. And the pineal gland releases 4 hormones every night. But it only releases it at certain times. You see, light and dark signals are fed through the optic nerve to a control centre in the brain where your body clock is located. And that body clock communicates with the pineal gland. And so it's in these times that these hormones are released. At the moment, it's between 9 p.m. and 2 a.m. So when summertime kicks in, and when I go home on Wednesday, very exciting day, I'll go home to summertime. And so in summertime, because the brain doesn't know about summertime, it's 10 p.m. and 3 a.m. These are the hours where these 4 hormones are released. One of the hormones is serotonin. If you want to feel good, go to bed early. Because when you go to bed early, you get a nice dose of serotonin. We had a lady doctor attend our program, and she told me a story. She said, my husband and I, we're sort of alternate people, and we gave birth to a little boy, and we believe that little boy, he knows what to do. We let him do anything. We let him eat whenever he wants. We let him go to bed whenever he wants. She said, by the age of 7, we had to admit we didn't like our son. He was so demanding, he was so obnoxious, and he would not go to bed till 11 o'clock at night. So my husband and I had a conference for the saving of our marriage. We decided to put our little boy to bed at 7 p.m. every night. Do you know, it's a powerful front when mother and father present to the family a united front. The child's got no hope. And this little boy protested, but this couple were united. You're going to bed. They take turns going in, reading him stories, had the light out. Took about half an hour the first night. Second night, took about 20 minutes. Third night, he went to sleep. And a lot of adults don't realise you put a united front. You always smile. You know what the smile says to the child? I love you, but you're going to bed. She said something happened which we did not expect. She said, our child changed. He was no longer obnoxious. He was no longer irritable. He was happy. He'd sit and play by himself. She said they looked at each other and said, we've been putting up this 7 years. And so when she heard this lecture, she said, I think he was getting good serotonin levels. Another hormone that's released is epithalamin. Last night we looked at the brain. Last night we looked at this amazing brain and its ability to regrow, rewire, even to be growing new pathways right till the day we die. Even if we live as long as my grandmother, 99, that was a good innings. We can be rewiring our brain. We can be growing new dendrites right up until the day we die. We should never stop learning. And I think it's a tragedy that most people go through their lives never fully accessing the full potential of our brain. I love the story of a 92-year-old man who graduated from law school. The 90-year-old man who learnt to play the piano. It's never too late. And this epithalamin hormone that's released every night between these hours, it increases learning capacity. And I say to the teachers, can you tell the children that had late nights? They said, oh yes. They're the children that just can't concentrate. They're the children that can't retain, that can't hold on to it. I said, well, now you can say to them, you didn't get your epithalamin levels last night, did you? So epithalamin increases learning capacity. So to get that epithalamin, we need to be going to bed early. And if you want to go to bed by 9 o'clock, you can't decide that at 5 to 9. Have you noticed? You actually have to start about 7 o'clock. Work towards it, working towards it. Epithalamin also puts us into a deep sleep. A lot of people think if they go to bed later, they're more likely to get tired and fall asleep, but the opposite's true. The earlier you go to sleep, the more likely you are to fall into a deep sleep because of epithalamin. The other hormone is arginine vasotocin. Arginine vasotocin is a very interesting one Arginine vesitocin is our natural painkiller. I have a girlfriend from the 80s when we were all nurses. And in the 1970s, 80s, a lot of nurses had back problems from lifting. Today, you see, they lost too many nurses with back problems, and now they've got orderlies, strong guys, they've got lifts, they've got cranes, they've got all sorts of things to save our nurses' backs. But my girlfriend had a very bad back, an injury, but also keeping working and another injury on top of that injury. Do you remember I taught you yesterday? If we don't listen to the first whisper, the body starts screaming. And part of being our own doctor is listening. Very important to listen. If the body says stop, we must stop. And so she had this very bad back, very painful back. She went to the doctor. They offered her painkillers. They said they could do a slight surgery, but she wasn't really interested. Sometimes surgery makes a big difference, but sometimes it doesn't. I love the story of Doc Mallock. Doc Mallock is a British orthopaedic surgeon, and he interviewed me about a year ago. He said, I chose not to take the vax, so no operating theatre will let me operate anymore. So he said, now I do podcasts. He said, I got to the point where I was only operating on 5% of my patients. Because he'd started to get interested in natural health. And that's why he refused the shot. He said, no safety studies. He said, that's not working for me. I want to know what's going into my body. And God's government is a government of freedom. Freedom is based on free choice. And that's why God made each one of us to be the masters of our own destiny. He said, no. But unfortunately, he lost most of his work. But he said, I'd got to the point where I was only operating on 5% of patients. So what was he doing? He was talking to them about the importance of being well hydrated because it's fluid between all the vertebrae in the spine. He said, I started to send them to physiotherapists to start building the muscles, the tendons, the ligaments. Isn't that wonderful news? So I told him about Dr. Kellogg. You heard of Dr. Kellogg, I said? He was a famous doctor, wrote many books on health in the, late 1800s. And I was reading the autobiography of a doctor who worked with him. She said he was an excellent surgeon, but he rarely used surgery. And that's what I always say to people. Yeah, maybe surgery is necessary sometimes, but let's try everything. Let's try everything possible. And you know what Doc Mallock said to me? He said a lady came into him one day and said, oh, can't you just do surgery? She didn't want to exercise. She didn't want to drink more water. She didn't. We get back to choose your heart, isn't it? Being obese is hard. Being fit is hard. Choose your heart. Our decisions determine our destiny. So my girlfriend went home, done a slight operation, but it hadn't helped much. And there she is with all these painkillers, and she's 35. How's that looking? How's that looking for the rest of her life? So she was perplexed. What do you do? And then she saw an advertisement for a pain specialist that had come to town giving lectures at night. So she went. And this pain specialist, he talked about arginine vesitocin. We have a natural painkiller and it's released every night. But when he talked about arginine vesitocin, he explained how when it's used, it leaves a waste. And then the next night, if that waste is still lying there, arginine vesitocin can't be used. So he showed how to get rid of the waste from arginine vesitocin. It's called exercise. You've heard of that one? When we exercise every day, it increases blood circulation, it increases our body's ability to throw off waste. And guess what that waste is? A lot of that waste is the waste from using arginine vesitocin the night before. But he also showed how when you exercise, he just advised starting to walk. She started to walk, and she got up to walking 5 kilometres a day. She walked. So what's happening to the ligaments and the muscles and the tendons? They're all strengthening, because we live in an incredible body with an incredible ability to adapt and adjust and compensate. You heard that one? Isn't it incredible that they take some people's gallbladders out and they still function? They take some women's uteruses out. Do you know, I was reading the report of one endocrinologist, and he claimed that 90% of hysterectomies are unnecessary. That's why, remember Psalm 146 verse 3, I'm sure you know it off by heart by now. Put not your trust in princes, neither in the Son of Man, in whom there is no help. Who are the princes? They're the authorities in the field. Doesn't mean you don't go to opinion. And if they say, you've got to have that uterus out, what do you say? Thank you so much for your advice. See the smile? Thank you so much for your opinion. Take the paper or the script or whatever they gave you. I'm going to seriously consider this. And you go home and you do consider it. You look at your options. You look at your options, because there are many options. There's just not my way or the highway. That's not how God works. I haven't read in the Bible where God says my way or the highway. Do you know what he does? He just presents, and he leaves the choice with us. What an honour. And so my girlfriend, she was excited, because she, as a nurse, she knew that if she's still on these painkillers in another 10 years, they're not quite doing what they originally did. She's now addicted to them. They're hurting her pancreas, they're hurting her liver, they're hurting her kidneys, they're destroying her microbiome. Not good. Not a good story. So she started. She said at first she could only walk around the block, then she walked 2 blocks, then she walked 3 blocks, and she walked more and more. And she was excited because she started to lose a little bit of weight. She started to lose that excess tummy fat that she had. And she also noticed that her pain was getting less and less. And she said within 2 weeks she was off all her painkillers. Incredible. She was able to access her natural painkiller, which is arginine vesitosin, but at the same time she was building up her body to compensate for that injury. What an incredible body we live in. Psalm 139 verse 14, the Bible says, I will praise you, I'm fearfully, wonderfully made, marvellous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well. And that psalmist didn't know what I'm explaining to you now, that we even have our own natural painkiller. But to get it, we need to be sleeping in those hours. To access it, not only sleeping in those hours, but also exercising in the day. Arginine vesitosin, it also slows down aging, and everyone over the age of 25 likes that one. Have you looked at the rock stars closely? From a distance, they might be slim with brown hair, but don't look too close at their face. They age very, very quickly. Because I'd like to suggest that most rock stars, they're just going to bed at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. The fourth hormone that's released in those hours is melatonin. And melatonin is the fix and rejuvenate nighttime hormone. Melatonin is the hormone that increases healing in those hours. So healing accelerates in those hours. When we go to bed at that time, we're actually laying our body on nature's operating table. I love nature's operating table. There are a whole lot of processes that are taking place while we sleep. And one of them is the action of melatonin that increases our body's ability to heal and repair. When I was nursing, I had a textbook. It was my anatomy and physiology textbook, and it explained metabolism. You've probably all heard of metabolism. That's the metabolic rate that our body runs at. And it's made up of 2 things. One is anabolism and cannibalism. Anabolism is happening while we sleep. And in my anatomy and physiology book, there's a little illustration of little men building up a brick wall while we sleep. And then through the day, there's cannibalism, which is the breaking down of that brick wall. And when that brick wall is totally broken down by the end of the day, how do we feel? We're tired, so we lay our body on nature's operating table, and as it describes in my anatomy and physiology book, the little men come along and build up the brick wall. And when the brick wall is fully built up, anabolism, guess what we do? We wake up. We wake up ready for the next day. We should leap out of bed in the morning. Did everyone hear that? I'm not just talking to the 9-year-olds, I think they're in another class. If we don't, we have to look at why. Is it because we went to bed too late? Is it because our bed's literally surrounded with a Christmas tree of technology? Technology should be out of the bedroom. Is your window open? Yes, be warm. I like being warm, but I also like breathing in fresh air. How big was your evening meal? Was it a 3-course meal? Well, that digestion is going to be so busy that it's going to actually take some of the energy from your pineal gland, and you're not going to release as many hormones. And so that brings me to the Sustain Me principles. And these Sustain Me principles cause an increase of the output of those hormones if you're keeping them. Sunshine. How does sunshine do it? Well, light and dark signals are fed through the optic nerve to the control centre where your body clock is located, and that body clock communicates with our pineal gland. Sunshine in the day and dark at night. That gives very clear signals. So one of the biggest disruptors is our eyes looking at screens once the sun goes down. When the sun goes down, my iPad closes. You see, the sun, it gives off blue light. And there's a receptor site on the retina for blue light. And when we're getting adequate blue light, it's called melanopsin, the receptor site. When our brain is getting adequate blue light, and by the way, our eyes are an extension of our brain. So when our eyes have sunshine in the day, not because we're looking at the sun, but just being outside, you will get it. When our eyes are getting adequate blue light, it affects the brain. It increases tactical reasoning. It increases the ability to solve mathematical problems, all because our eyes are exposed to the sun. Unfortunately, the screens have blue light, but it's not the same as sunlight. No, you can't look at the screens and get the same benefit as sunlight. It has a different frequency. But it's similar enough so that if you wake up in the night and look at your phone, the message to the brain is, wake up, daytime, because of the blue light messages. So please don't sleep with your phone under your pillow. Do you know 80% of Americans do? And the pillow's no protection unless it's made out of lead. So that's another point, and that's that electromagnetic field going through. Our phones should be out of our bedroom. If you're on call, if you need to be accessed, put it in the hallway. You'll wake, but it allows you a better quality of sleep when you don't have access to that. But the other thing I wanted to point out was looking at those screens once the sun goes down. I occasionally have a little flick on WhatsApp because I'm in contact with my family, and 4:00 in the afternoon is when America wakes up. And I notice at the moment your sun sets, what about 4:45? So yes, I have a quick flick, and if I do talk, I have it on speakerphone. Sunshine increases the output of those hormones at night because of the light and dark signals. These hormones need us to be well hydrated. As we looked at last night when we looked at the brain, our brain's a hydroelectric system. No hydro, no electricity. Start early. Have you got your water next to your bed? That's when you start. The most dehydrated time of the whole day is when you wake up in the morning. These hormones can't be produced in a dehydrated body. Sleep, to be able to access the output of those hormones, we need to be ideally getting several hours before midnight. In a minute, I'm going to show you some more processes that are happening in the night, and you'll see even more the importance of grabbing those early hours. Now, there's some old sayings that illustrate, and these sayings have been around for hundreds of years. Early to bed, early to rise, makes a man healthy, wealthy and wise. And the other one is, an hour before midnight is worth 2 hours after midnight. These are all sayings that people had just through observance. They didn't know the science that I'm explaining to you. Trust in God. There's one thing that'll keep us awake, and that is worry. Do you know, there's the old saying, worry is blind and cannot discern the future. God has 1,000 ways, is a solution God. He has 1,000 ways to get us out of trouble. It's a matter of trusting him. And my grandson Lennox gave me a beautiful illustration of trust. We were walking beside the creek. He's 3 and he's a little uncertain, trying not to fall. He turned around, looked up at me and held my hand, and immediately became invincible. Totally invincible. In fact, it was a little scary, the trust that he had in me, because I'm not quite as strong as his father. He was leaning over the creek. And I thought, that's the sort of trust that God wants us to have in him. Trust and faith are very close. And the Bible definition of faith is Hebrews 11 verse 1. Faith is the substance of things hoped for. It's the evidence of things not seen. Lennox had total faith that I would hold his hand. And I did. But he had no doubt that I wouldn't hold him. And I did. And I said, Father in heaven, I'm learning this lesson. And there's a beautiful verse that's found in Isaiah chapter 42, verse 5. It says, Thus saith God, the Lord, the creator of the heavens that stretched them out, he that brought forth the earth and that which comes out of it, he that giveth breath to the people upon it and spirit to them that dwell therein. He said, I, the Lord, have called thee in righteousness, I will hold thine hand. Isn't that a beautiful verse? He says, I will hold thine hand. And I was reading in one book, it explained it like this. It said, God reaches down. You see that? We don't have to look at it. It's there. Beautiful illustration of the trust that we are to have in God. We will sleep better then. In fact, there's another verse. It's Isaiah 26 verse 3. It says, God will keep him in perfect peace when our minds are stayed on him because we trust in him. Perfect peace means perfect sleep, is that right? Abstain. There are some things might surprise you and it might not surprise you. There are some things that will interfere with the output of those hormones. Caffeine. I'm not getting a groan. I was getting a groan at one audience. Oh, here she goes again. What caffeine does is it blocks the output of those hormones in half for 5 hours. So you will not get a quality of sleep drinking caffeine. We talked about it on the first night, Monday night, and I did advise if you're drinking coffee, don't stop or you won't be able to attend the next lecture. Start easing off it little by little by little. Alcohol. Alcohol causes a 40% reduction in the release of those hormones. So the red wine might put you to sleep, but you're going to wake with half-charged batteries. So they're two of the stimulants that many people take that directly affect that. Doesn't mean the other stimulants are all right, but I'm just targeting the ones that inhibit the output of these hormones. Inhale, when we breathe in through our nose, in and out. Are you practicing? Not easy, is it? Have you tried sleeping with your mouth taped up? You could tape it up like this, or you could be very civilised and just put a little bit of tape underneath your nose and to your chin. And what that will do is that will ensure that you're nose breathing while you sleep. When you nose breathe through your sleep, remember nose purifies the air, humidifies the air, warms the air. It'll ensure that you're getting more oxygen at the cellular level, so you wake refreshed. And sleep apnea and snoring would greatly reduce by nose breathing. Nutrition. These hormones require peak nutrition to be able to even be produced efficiently. They need us to be having lots of minerals. Minerals are found in all your fibre foods. They need us to be having adequate proteins. Proteins in your legumes, your nuts, your seeds. But also fats, because 50% of the membrane around every cell is made up of fat. And these are fats that come from the hand of the Creator. There is one oil that is talked about in detail in the Bible, and that's olive oil. It's my favourite oil. It's passed the test of time. Moderation. Moderation in all good things. If you need to eat at night, please eat in great moderation. If you eat at night, make it the last or the lightest meal of the day. We should be eating lunch like a king. Breakfast like a king, lunch like a queen. And I agree, sometimes the king and the queen eat the same amount. And then supper like a pauper. One lady said, "What do paupers eat?" I said, "Sometimes nothing." Make it very light at night, because when our body sleeps, our stomach wants to sleep. So this is how the Sustain Me principles, and forgive me, I flipped the M and the E around. This is how the Sustain Me principles will help you to sleep better at night. But I'm going to go a step further now, and we're going to look at some processes that happen in the brain while we sleep. It was probably about the 1950s that researchers were starting to look more deeply at the science of sleep. You see, in the 1950s, there wasn't a lot of sleep problems, but I think some televisions were starting to come out. And they first did their experiments on rats. And what they discovered is that with the electrodes on the rats' brains, when the brain was busy, the eye flickered. And then there were other times where the brain was fairly still and the eyes were still. And they thought this was unusual. And then they started to do it on people. In fact, one researcher even did it on his little 2-year-old, and he found the same thing, that there were 90-minute cycles in the night. And they called, when the eyes were still and the brain was still, they called that non-rapid eye movement time. And when the brain was busy and so the eyes were flickering, that was rapid eye movement time. In non-rapid eye movement time, there was a cleaning system. And this cleaning system was carried out, we looked at this yesterday a little bit, by a system called the glymphatic system. And the glymphatic system is made up of glial cells. And these glial cells are the brain's vacuum cleaner. There are more glial cells in the brain than brain cells, and we have 1 trillion brain cells. So what are they cleaning up? They're cleaning up waste from neuronal activity. They're cleaning up waste from the combustion of oxygen and glucose at the cellular level. They're also, and we looked at this yesterday, cleaning up any little calcified deposits that might start to build up on the front part of the brain. And we also looked at this yesterday. When we make the decision to forgive, these glial cells are even more activated, and they start cleaning up any little thorns that grow between the nerve cells that can cause disease. Fascinating. There's your glymphatic system, and it's active in non-rapid eye movement time. It appears that the cells shrink, which allows more fluid around the cells for this cleanup. It can be likened to the street cleaners in the city every night. And I remember when we were in London a few months ago, we went out early in the morning for our morning walk. We found a park, and the street cleaners were still busy there. And when I saw those street cleaners, I thought of the glymphatic system, those glial cells. This is what they're doing while we sleep. Something else happens in non-rapid eye movement time. There's a courier service. So what's this courier service? Let me explain. Here's the brain, looking at the brain from sideways. And at the back of the brain is the hippocampus. And in the hippocampus is the short-term memory unit. So everything that we're taking in through the day is stored in the hippocampus, our short-term memory unit. But while we sleep, there's a courier service. And that courier service takes these memories up to the long-term memory unit. And that long-term memory unit is at the top of the cortex. The cortex takes up part of the brain like that. And so in this courier service, all our memories for the day, while we sleep, are couriered up to the long-term memory unit. What an amazing brain. What's happening in rapid eye movement time? In rapid eye movement time, there is a filing system. I read a book called Why We Sleep by Dr. Matthew Walker. He's a neurologist. He's an atheist, and he just gives the facts on what happens while we sleep, but he made a comment. He said it's almost as if sleep has an intelligence. Isn't that interesting? And if he was talking to me, I'd say, that's right, mate. It's called God. God created this amazing brain. So why did he say it's almost as if sleep has an intelligence? Because what he discovered, and many researchers, other ones have too, is that it's not filed in any old haphazard way. It's filed in a perfect order. Isn't that incredible? All our negative memories are stored together. All our positive memories are stored together. All our memories of a certain event that happened maybe here and maybe there, that's all stored together. There's a perfect order in the filing system. Now, I remember when I was psych nursing, we had a saying, nerves that lie together, fire together. That was a saying we had. And that's exactly what he showed, that all our positive memories are all filed together. All our negatives memories are filed together. Have you noticed, I think we all notice this, is that when something wonderful happens in our life, everything's wonderful. Is that right? But when something goes wrong in our life, have you noticed? Other negative things come up as well. It's important to know this because then it won't catch you. So when something goes wrong and all the negative emotions come up, you can catch it and say, nah, I'm not taking that one on. And that's what we looked at last night. The front part of our brain is where it's screened. Where those emotions we can say no thank you, or we can say yes please. And that brings us back to it's our God-given right to choose what we do. And as we looked at yesterday, we have more say over what we think than we think we do. So there's a filing system of all our memories. What else happens is this is where dreaming happens. There's been a lot of theories on dreams. I know being trained as a psychiatric nurse, Freud had all these meetings on dreams. We also know from the Bible that God sends people dreams sometimes to show them things. But what Matthew Walker came to the conclusion was that the dreaming helps our brain know how to file. Have you noticed your dreams are weird? Your laughter tells me you agree. Now, my eldest son, James, his partner gave birth to a tiny little baby. She's only about 4 weeks old still. And the night before Billiana gave birth to her baby, I had a dream. And I dreamt my son was breastfeeding the baby. You're almost embarrassed to share your dreams, is that right? In fact, if you mention them too much, they might lock you up, is that right? You see, in the front part of the brain is where our reason, intellect and judgment is. And that's actually our board of senses. Well, that's asleep while we're dreaming. So all sorts of wonderful things can come up, and that helps with the way things are filed. It's also in rapid eye movement time that there's a consolidation of what we've learnt through the day. So as you're learning new things, and I'm sure you're going to want to learn new things no matter your age, go to bed early. You'll not only get your epithalamus, which will increase your learning capacity, but you'll also get a consolidation or a confirmation or a settling in of the things you've learnt through the day. This is also when the inventions happen, when amazing things come into our brain. You could also say it's a peak creativity time. So what I'd like to show you now is how these two work together every night. Dr. Matthew Walker, he came to the conclusion after all the research he did, after all the other research that he'd been looking at, which has been done since the 50s, he was not happy with the conclusion. Because the conclusion he came to was this: we need 8 hours. Notice what I said, he was not happy. And how many people hope that we can get away with 6 hours or 5 hours? He said it has to be 8 for all the processes to be completely played out that need to be played out. So this can be 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. Not many people choose that one, though I met a lady the other day who does. It might be 9 to 5, that's probably my favourite. At a stretch in the summertime, it might be 10 to 6. Let's choose 9 to 5. And look at what happens, or the activity of non-rapid eye movement in these hours. So the first hour and a half, because what they discovered that these are active in 90-minute cycles. So the first hour and a half is 9 to 10:30. Between 9 to 10:30, non-rapid eye movement takes up 80% of the activity. Whereas rapid eye movement, it only takes up 20% of the activity. So the next hour and a half is 10:30 to midnight, so 12. 60% non-rapid eye movement activity and 40% rapid eye movement. So right in the middle of the night, we've got 12 midnight to 1:30 a.m. It's about 50-50 right in the middle of the night, and that's probably not a surprise to anyone. But as we move on through the night, we now have 1:30 to 3 a.m. And from 1:30 to 3 a.m., non-rapid eye movement is 40%, and rapid eye movement comes up to 60%. And then in the last section of the night would be 3 to 5 a.m. It's only 20% non-rapid eye movement time, and yet it's an 80% rapid eye movement time. As I studied this, I thought this explains so much. It explains so much. It explains my many people who are going to bed at midnight, 1, 2, every night. They are coming down with dementia, Alzheimer's. Because what they discovered was in the brain, in the front part of the brain, this is where our reason, intellect and judgment happen. And they've done post-mortems on people with dementia, Alzheimer's, and they have found amyloid plaques, which are calcified deposits which have built up in the front part of the brain. And when those calcified deposits build up in the front part of the brain, they compromise or inhibit our intellect, reason and judgment powers. And thus, our will is compromised. God never designed for people to lose their minds in their latter years. I haven't read about it in the Bible, have you? Actually, I read about Nebuchadnezzar who ate grass for 7 years. But we know that was because he defied God. And after 7 years, his brain was totally restored. But that's it. That's it. Some of the patriarchs, they're living 800 years and their brain is clear. That's God's design. God's design is not that our brains deteriorate in the latter years of our life. And when we looked last night at preventing Alzheimer's, we looked at how you can have 20 people with Alzheimer's. It can be slightly different factors in every case. But a common denominator that is very prevalent is not getting enough sleep. It is in the early hours of the night, or the early hours of the night, before midnight, before 1:30, when our cleaning system is the most active. So if a person doesn't go to bed till 2 a.m, can you see they're just about missing out on the cleaning system? So when we go to bed early every night and our glymphatic system is activated, if there were any little amyloid plaques that are starting to appear, they're cleaned up. That'll get everyone to bed early tonight, won't it? Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan, two famous people that boasted that they only needed 5 hours sleep a night. What a deception. Do you know, in my next lecture, I'm going to assess that deception and where it comes from, because it's a deception. It's a total deception. And I'm sure that if Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher had heard this lecture, they would have gone to bed earlier, don't you think? I don't know anyone that wants to spend their latter years with dementia and Alzheimer's. No, no, no. Sleep isn't the only factor. As we looked at back here, there it is. It can be like a sunshine. Well, half of our guests here in full sun. But I've got some good news, it's moving. Dehydration, that can be a huge factor. And a lot of elderly people don't drink enough water because they don't want to have accidents. But if they were told, oh, look at that. Ah. I didn't think the sun moved that fast. My husband's a pilot. He said the sun moves very fast early morning and late afternoon, but I know it doesn't move that fast in the middle of the day. Thank you. I can see the discomfort of the sun. Yes, good timing. We need that sunshine, we need adequate water, and we need to go to bed early. It's a matter of taking steps, and we're going to look at that in the middle in a minute, of how you can train yourself back into more sleep. And so the early nights are powerful. Early to bed, early to rise, makes a man healthy, wealthy and wise. And they didn't know what I'm telling you here. An hour before midnight is worth 2 after midnight. Why did they have that? I was saying they just observed. They just observed. And that observations showed them. And that's why it's important to do that important thing of listening. Listening to what your body says. And so when I read Matthew Walker's book, I was confronted with something. You see, I used to say to people, since I turned 50, I only need 6 hours sleep a night. You see, you feel okay on 6 hours, but it's a total deception. You don't feel okay on 4. And when I read this, when I read what happens while we sleep, I came to the conclusion I need to have more sleep. So I had to train myself back into more sleep. And my problem was I would wake up early, wake up 4:30, and my brain would jump into the chat room. Now this isn't the chat room on the internet, this is the one in your brain. Actually the most amazing computer on the planet. So let me introduce you to my chat room. So this is my chat room. I wake up in the morning, all right, I'm going home in 2 days now. I've got this, now I've got this. Did I send postcards to that person? You will never sleep while you're in the chat room. And I'm sure my chat rooms are different to my husband's chat room. I don't think he's thinking about making a full circle dress for Sophia's birthday and knitting new booties for the little new baby or planting a flower garden. That's not Michael's chat room. Everyone's chat room can be slightly different. But you will never sleep if you get into the chat room. You've got to get out of the chat room. How do you get out of the chat room? Well, the old saying is to count sheep jumping over a fence. Is that right? 1, 2, 3. Or you can count from 100 backwards. Or you can read a really boring book. Just put a soft light on. The Life Habits of the Australian Platypus. Just something boring. I know that's one thing I'll sometimes do, and when the book falls on my chest, I turn the light off and I'm gone. I've got to get out of that chat room. I don't know whether it's because I'm the daughter of an inventor, but I'm solving all the problems of the world in the middle of the night. But you'll never sleep. One lady told me that she thinks of someone in her childhood who was a great auntie, and she loved going to her house. She had the most beautiful flower garden, and she had little china teacups, and she had the prettiest little, lovely little doilies. Can you see what you're doing? And what you'll find is your brain has a network. And once you start thinking about the great auntie, then other things will come up. And have you noticed? You'll explore more and more and more and more. In one platform that's covering my social media, I have to give 4 5-minute lectures a month. And I think, what am I going to do? And then I'll start talking, and then the network begins. And as the network begins, and Jacqueline stops recording me, I said, I've got another idea. And then I do that one, and then another idea. Have you noticed? It's a network that happens in our brain. When you start thinking of one subject, then a whole lot come up. We've got a most incredible brain. What I do, because I love memorising, you might have noticed, what I'll do is I'll go through my memory verses. So my biggest memory is James chapter 1, 27 verses. So I'll go through that. And you have to think about the verse, and you have to think about what verse is next. And the number of the verse, you're out of the chat room. And in the morning, I think, where did I get? I think I got to verse 13. Anything to get you out of the chat room, because you will not sleep if you're in the chat room. That's what keeps most people awake. You will never sleep if you look at your phone. Then the message to the brain is daytime wake up, so get that phone out of the bedroom. And you will never sleep if you get annoyed with the fact that you can't sleep. Have you noticed? And so what Adriana Huffington, and she wrote a book called The Science of Sleep, she suggests being thankful, and it's a Bible principle. It's found in 1 Thessalonians 5:18. The Bible says, "In everything give thanks, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus concerning you." So you lie there and you're thankful. Thank you so much. I can't sleep, Father in heaven. Now I can talk to you, but not in the chat room. Lie there and be thankful. Be thankful that your eyes see. If your eyes don't see well, be thankful that your feet walk. Be thankful for what you have. Be thankful that you're not in a Siberian work camp with newspaper for your bedding. I love reading true stories. I love reading true stories of people and what they've been through. It inspires me. I love that human spirit. And the best book to read when you're on a 15-hour flight to Australia is someone's experiences of going through Auschwitz. You will never complain about that seat in the plane. It's all relative, isn't it? It's all relative. But being thankful what you have, I believe, unties God's hands and allows Him to work in our lives. One lady, when she heard this, she said, "I'm so discouraged." She said, "I've been sleeping 5 hours a night. I only used to sleep 4, now I'm sleeping 5, and you reckon 8? I said, be very thankful for your 5. Be very thankful for your 5. And when you're very thankful for your 5, it's quite possible the next night it'll be 5.5. And it's quite possible in a couple of weeks you might even get up to 6. Be thankful what you have. Rome wasn't built in a day. We're not there yet. Be patient. It takes time. So are there some things that you can take to help you sleep? There are some mild tranquilizers. A very mild one is chamomile. Some people find a cup of hot chamomile tea just before they go to bed. The heat and the mild tranquilizer effect of chamomile just calms them. Some people don't want to do that, or they'll be up in a few hours to have to go to the bathroom. I'll leave it up to you. You're the doctor. A stronger one is valerian. And valerian is a much stronger tranquilizer and sedative. And it's not a very nice tea. It's a very strong flavour. So some people choose to have a tablet or a capsule with valerian in it. If you take hot chamomile tea, because it's a hot tea, you're getting action almost straight away. But with a tablet or a capsule, you've got to give time for the stomach to break it down and then be absorbed into your body. The other option is to take it in a tincture form. We don't use alcohol tinctures, we use glycerin tinctures. So that's another way to get it fairly quickly. Or magnesium. Some have found that magnesium helps to relax them, to put them off to sleep. And the most absorbable form of magnesium is citrate, magnesium citrate. And a person can try maybe 500 milligrams before they go to bed. Sorry, I felt a sneeze, and when you've got a broken rib, you can't sneeze. So again, you're the doctor, see what works. Some people find a hot Epsom salts bath before they go to bed. Epsom salts is magnesium sulfate, and that absorbs in through the skin, and the heat of the bath is very, very relaxing. Some people have found that a melatonin supplement can help. What Dr. Matthew Walker found in his book, Why We Sleep, that sleeping tablets really don't help. They don't put you into a decent sleep or a sleep that revives you, and then the person can get addicted to the sleeping tablets. So these are some of the things that they have found helps to relax and get someone off to sleep. But remember, you can train yourself back into sleep. But Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse 12 says, the sleep of a labouring man is sweet. In other words, when you're physically exhausted, you are more likely to go to sleep. In fact, yesterday, my daughter's 2 children were climbing the rock wall in Zoran's house, and she said to me, they're going to sleep well tonight. Because they climbed, and then they used the brace to fall down, then they climbed. So we need to be physically active. When we're physically active, at the end of the day, we'll be physically exhausted. And that is more likely to help us sleep. Many can't sleep today because they're not getting sunshine, they're dehydrated, they're not going to bed early enough, they're anxious, they're having too much caffeine and alcohol, they're breathing through their mouth, they don't exercise, they're eating a diet that is devitalised, it's a refined diet. So that is a contributing factor to not being able to sleep. But one last factor, and we have found this not in every case, but in some cases, especially ladies have told me that when they start applying the wild yam cream, that wild yam cream boosts progesterone, and progesterone is the calming hormone. Progesterone is the hormone that helps for you to have a good sleep. You're the doctor. I believe that God designed each one of us to be the doctor because only we know what we've been through. Only we know how different things affect us, and only we know how we respond to different things. So I trust you've been inspired to go to bed earlier tonight and train yourself back into better sleep. Thank you.